The first scream I heard wasn't human. It was the marsh, out past my porch, where my father taught me to read the wind in the cattails a black ribbon of emergency access. The HOA poured across my wetlands, shuddered and peeled like sunburnt skin. Stormwater clawed at it. The county siren wailed. My coffee went cold in my hand, and all I could think was how they fined me for planting willow stakes without permission. Then later rode without asking the only person who actually owned the land. You know how it goes. They call it progress. Post a glossy rendering with a gazebo and community safety corridors stamped across it. Hide behind a 30-page rulebook of architectural controls. Make you feel selfish for remembering where my granddad set his duck blind after the '72 flood. I'm not anti-neighbor. Not even anti-HOA in theory. I'm pro-home. Pro-father's legacy. Pro-listening to a marsh that's outlived every board president who ever tried to straighten it with a ruler. That evening, the sky turned the kind of blue you only see when trouble's walking. First sheets of rain hit the rail, and the boards under my boots trembled. Dad's old service flag, what we fly on holidays and storm snapped like it was yelling too. I grabbed the flashlight I inherited along with this land and headed to the fence line. The beam found the new road. Looked like a belt cinched too tight over a wet belly. Water, trapped by a line that never should have been there, pooled and rose. Hunting the oldest exit it knew downhill into my neighbor's low yard. Sir, step back from the common area. That's how the HOA security volunteer greeted my vest, clipboard, and borrowed authority. Even in the rain, his hair was parted sharp enough to split kindling. He barked like I was trespassing on their road when their road was trespassing on my marsh. I pointed at the survey stake. This isn't common, I said. This is the Carter parcel. My father's line. My line. You have my letter? He did fold it into fourths in a Ziploc. The board called my certified notice non-compliant, then filed it like a grocery receipt. That's what happens when you tell folks something they don't want to hear. They said the wetlands were seasonal, said the marsh was a puddle, said a road would improve emergency response times. No state permit anyone could show me. Just a bobcat, a weekend crew, and a Monday email inviting me to speak for 3 minutes at the next meeting if I submitted my remarks 5 business days ahead. Well, I had 3 minutes right now. God sent them. Their culvert a single cheap, pipe-choked. The water came up, then over. Pressure built under the asphalt. And in one hard surge, the marsh took a breath and spit. The black ribbon buckled. It tore with a sound halfway between a groan and a laugh. A slab slid off like a dark sled into the ditch. Call the sheriff. Someone yelled. He's already on his way, I said. When the crew rolled in on a Saturday, I'd tried to keep it neighborly coffee. Conversation, a knock on the president's door. Coffee didn't work. The letter didn't work. The handshake didn't work. The HOA lawyer's first-name basis with the board did on them. So I called the sheriff in the county floodplain guy and asked them to see it with their own eyes. Thunder walked across the fields and sat down in my driveway. The new road behaved like a dam. The marsh, my marsh, has been a sponge for 100 years of Carter men and women. Tonight, the sponge wore rubber. Double quotes, sir. I need you to return to your residence. The vest shouted again, softer now. My residence, I said, is where that water's headed, if the culvert gives. So is yours. You like your basement? He looked back at his tracked home. The big picture window across from mine blinked, went out, then on again. A dog somewhere howled, lonely and offended. A cruiser slid in, tires hissing on wet gravel. Sheriff McKay stepped out like a man trying to stand between two sides of the same church. He's had coffee on my porch. Knows my father's stories. Also knows who writes checks to the HOA fundraisers evening. Said then stopped to watch water chew another bite from the asphalt. Good Lord. Emergency access, I said. McKay rubbed his hat brim. Who authorized this? He asked the vest. The board, sir. For safety? Permits. We were told they're in process. By who? The president? Where is she? Right on cue, here came Eleanor Whitman, white raincoat, red umbrella, lips pinched the way you do when you've convinced yourself you're right. She walked like she expected the weather to apologize. Sheriff, she sang. Thank heavens. We've got a trespasser riling the contractors. I haven't seen a contractor in 40 minutes, I said. They left when your culvert burped. Eleanor stared at the road. Didn't flinch. This is temporary, she said. The engineer? There's an engineer? I advised a second culvert once we receive the permit, I said. Which you don't have, which is in process, she repeated. Perhaps we table this until the storm passes. Nature hates tabling. The marsh filed its own motion. Water rose into the small of my boots. Downhill, the Ramirez porch light flickered and went black. Mrs. Ramirez is 82. Keeps her wedding shoes in a hat box under the bed. I know because I fixed that bed frame last fall. They can't swim. They shouldn't have to. McKay sighed. Looked at me. Looked at Eleanor. Looked at the buckling road. I'm closing this access, he said, radio already in hand. County roads and floodplain are en route. Everyone off this section now. You don't have authority, Eleanor started. Ma'am, he said, you poured a road across a mapped wetland during flood season without a posted permit. Tonight isn't a theory night. Lightning wrote its name across the clouds. A transformer popped. The crown of the road lifted like a lung, taking one last inhale. Then, with the tidy finality of a zipper, it let go. The asphalt folded, slumped, and slid toward the water. The sound was so satisfying I felt guilty enjoying it. That, I said, is the oldest neighbor we've got, reminding us who lived here first. For a beat, nobody talked. We just listened drain on tin, wind and willow roots, a marsh finding its shape again. I pulled my phone and opened a photo of Dad standing knee-deep, right where that road had been, holding a string of ducks with a grin you could see from town. I didn't start this fight, but I was sure going to finish it right. You'd think a night like that would teach everybody the same lesson. You'd think watching a marsh chew up a bad idea would make a board humble. Pride, though. Pride can drag a person clean off their feet. Morning after, I walked the fence line with a thermos and a camera. Smelled like wet iron and clean mud. Cattails leaned like old men after a dance. The access road lay there like a mangled scarf tossed by a storm. It didn't just move water, it shoved mess into the Ramirez yard. I waded in, helped Mr. Ramirez pull lawn chairs from a drift. He shook his head half laughing because sometimes you either laugh or you cry. We staked his gas water heater upright with a rope and traded flood stories. I remember your father, he said, working the knot. He walked this edge after every big rain. Said it spoke different every time. He listened, I said, by noon. The HOA blast hit. Temporary access compromised. Community workday announced. The flood was an unforeseeable event. The marsh somehow had violated the rules. At the bottom, reminder. Landscaping infractions must be corrected within 10 days. Fines apply. I scrolled and found my name. $250 for unauthorized. Willows reads. $1.75 for fence post adjustment. Visible from street without approval. Wanted me to rip out the willow stakes, granddad's trick for knitting a shoreline, and submit a drawing for how the fence should look while I did. You know that heat that starts low behind your sternum? That's anger. I let it sit. Then I called my sister, the calm side of the Carter line. Breathe, she said. Then go get the papers. We keep a simple box in a safe place. Dad labeled it with a Sharpie, deeds plus things that matter. Inside, land surveys, a 90s conservation letter that names the wetlands. Granddad's pencil note about spring bog turtles on the back of a feed store flyer, and a printout from the state watershed map with the marsh striped blue and green. I laid it all on the table like setting out the good silver. Brewed coffee. Sharpened a pencil. Wrote the second letter, the one I should never have had to write. Dear Board, I began. Kept it clean. Kept it neighborly. Attached the deed and the wetland map. Used their language, because sometimes that's what gets heard. Please consider this formal notice that the recently constructed emergency access crosses a mapped wetland and privately owned parcel without permission or permit. Remove all materials immediately. Withdraw fines related to riparian buffer plantings. Direct future communication through county floodplain or legal counsel.
2 copies.
1 certified mail. 1 hand delivered because in a small town, contact still means something. Eleanor opened her door in an ironed blouse. Like the flood had skipped her living room out of respect, I kept my voice sweet. That takes work when someone treats your father's name like scrap paper. She took the letter with 2 fingers and smiled the way you do at unruly kids. Thank you, Mr. Carter, she said. We'll review at the next meeting. Which I'll attend, I said. So will the county. Her eyebrows flicked. No need to escalate. There was no need to pave a marsh, I said. We stood a beat me dripping on her welcome mat, her calculating what kind of neighbor I am. The kind who sues for sport? No. The kind who doesn't blink when home's at stake. Yes, she closed with a polite promise. I walked back through air that smelled like wet drywall and a generator that needed a tune-up that night. The HOA posted about volunteer sandbagging. I showed up. Filled bags. Kept quiet ground, needed hands more than opinions. Eleanor was there, taking pictures. Thanked everyone by first name and skipped mine. You laugh at that, or your pride turns to stone. I chose to laugh soft and stack another bag by the Ramirez steps. Later, a knock. No siren, just Sheriff McKay, hat in hand. We sat at my table with coffee and the maps. He rubbed his face like a man who knew too many people on both sides. County's coming Wednesday, he said. Floodplain, roads, watershed. You okay with them walking it? Please, I said. Bring boots. He glanced at Dad's photo on the fridge. He'd be proud. Pride's tricky, I said. Trying to keep it on the right side. Wednesday landed like a gavel. County truck, idling by the curb. 2 guys in ball caps who speak fluent water. They didn't need my map, they had theirs. 1 finger on the spot where the access road cut the shore like a scar across a palm. Basic questions. Common sense. Why here? Who designed it? Where's the permit? Eleanor arrived with the board's lawyer and a binder big enough to stop a door. She spoke in crisp paragraphs. County listened without blinking. Took measurements. Pulled the conservation letter from their archive and read it ankle-deep in muck. Okay, one said. This isn't just mapped wetland. It's noted in prior events. I didn't gloat. Takes practice. I pointed at the water line on a willow. It always comes here first, I said. Then it goes there. I traced the flow downhill. You interrupted the spine. The lawyer cleared his throat. Our position is the road is a temporary safety measure. County shrugged. Our position is you filled a wetland. Remove it. Replant. Coordinate with the state. Eleanor smiled then, not the warm kind. The this isn't over kind. 2 days later, another board letter anyway. Fines outstanding. Daily accrual to follow. I carried it to the porch, sat in Dad's chair, and laughed for real. The kind that drops your shoulders. Meanwhile, the county staked a sign at the marsh edge. Stop work. Wetland violation under review. Neighbors came by in 2s and 1s casseroles and opinions in hand. Some angry because the flood kissed their carpets. Some worried about property values. Some embarrassed they'd voted yes when the access sounded like a free upgrade. You're not the villain, Mrs. Ramirez said, setting a pie on my counter. The land told the truth. People just didn't want to hear while it was still a whisper. My sister texted a photo of Granddad and hip waders. You've got that look, she wrote. Carter stubborn. Keep it pointed right. I did. Sat front row at the meeting. Spoke my exact 3 minutes come clear. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about listening to the oldest thing in town and respecting the names on the deed. I held up the conservation letter. Held up the map, didn't raise my voice. The room got quiet enough to hear the soda machine hum. They took comments. Some defended the board hard to admit you were wrong in front of people you borrow sugar from. Others spoke like they'd tasted river in their tap. Eleanor kept the timer running and her chin high. The lawyer whispered. They moved to new business. Like water wasn't still drying in living rooms. That night, rinsing mud from my boots, I realized what cut deepest wasn't the road or the fines. It was the disregard. The way they looked at my father's name like it was inconvenient paper. My father's signature has weight. He taught me to sight a straight fence wire, to listen for red-winged blackbirds before I spoke. A letterhead can outvote a homeowner for a while. It can't outlast a marsh. The historic flood they'd talk about all summer came 2 weeks later. The first storm was a warning. The second was the sermon sky went slate. Wind traced seams in the siding. My porch flag stood straight out, steady, refusing to let go. I put coffee on and called the Ramirez grandson. We raised their things. Stacked boxes on chairs. Wrapped the hat box with the wedding shoes and carried it upstairs like a crown. I had my go bag packed, what you learn living near water. I didn't plan on leaving by midnight. Road crews had posted closures. County crews checked drains where they actually belonged. The HOA, to their credit, canceled the reconstruction workday after the stop work notice. The illegal road sat like a bruise, sagging lower. Edges chewed like a dog with a slipper. If you've walked a marsh since you were little, you feel it's alive. It swells, exhales, remembers? Then the front hit 30 minutes of rain that sounded like a freight train parked on my porch. Lightning flashed. In that strobe, I watched the access road change its mind. A pickup-sized chunk slid forward. Another cracked and tipped. Then the middle gave up, rolled into the dark, and vanished with a sound so deep it felt more than you heard. The marsh took back its channel clean, quick like opening a stuck jar without stripping the lid. Water rushed, but without a dam, it spread where it should, through reeds, around willow roots. Into the low bowl my family kept wild on purpose. There's a difference between chaos and flow. Chaos breaks what didn't need breaking. Flow eases pressure. The Ramirez yard rose, then held. Their steps stayed dry. I may have cried a little, but the rain baptized the whole county so nobody could tell. At dawn, sirens quieted. Sheriff cruised slow. County trucks returned. Neighbors walked out with towels around their necks like capes. Sun climbed over the ridge with the soft gold you only get after a hard night. And for the first time in weeks, birds. A great blue heron, Dad's favorite marsh, judge landed like a foreman taking notes. Even the loud HOA volunteers stood soft, like a funeral had passed and left wisdom behind. That afternoon, an HOA notice hid in boxes. Same letterhead, different tone. After consultation with county and state agencies, the HOA will not reconstruct the emergency access across the wetlands. Remediation and restoration will commence under supervision. Fines related to riparian planting are rescinded. Then, almost as an afterthought, we appreciate input from concerned residents, including Mr. Carter. Not an apology. A beginning. A week later, stakes marked a real replanting, plan drawn by someone who knew the names of things. Kids showed up with shovels. We pressed willow cuttings into soft banks. Set swamp milkweed, buttonbush, and sedges. County folks showed where to plant so roots would stitch water to soil instead of punning it toward living rooms. I taught a teenager how to sight a straight stake down the fence line. He listened like he wanted to be the kind of neighbor a town remembers kindly. Eleanor came, too. No camera, no blouse that could double as a warning flag. Just a jacket, jeans, and a face I hadn't seen, ensure, human. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly, "can we talk?" We stepped aside. She took a breath. I was wrong. The words scraped on the way out. I thought the road would make us safer. I thought we could manage the water. I didn't. "Listen." She looked at the new willow whips. "I'm rescinding your fines personally. And I've asked the board to adopt a policy. We consult the county before any project that touches water. I didn't pretend the mistakes didn't cost us. I also didn't twist the knife. Pride turned the right way looks a lot like grace." "Thank you," I said. "Come by some evening. We'll walk it when the light's right. I'll show you where my dad stood when the teal came in." "I'd like that. There's a kind of justice that clangs like handcuffs." "I won't." Part of me wanted that. But the kind that lasts sounds more like quiet, like a marsh settling back into its bed, like a flag lifting easy over a porch that's learned patience. A month later, the county letter arrived. Remediation complete. Permit closed. No further action required. Good words. The HOA posted new guidelines for water in wild places. Better words. Season turned different to forms and fines. Red-winged blackbirds returned. Frogs started up at night. The same willow stakes they fined me for leafed out and stitched a green seam across the place. Where a bad idea once lay like a scar, I still see the board's lawyer at the coffee counter by the feed store. He nods. I nod back. We're not friends, not enemies. Neighbors. That's harder and better. On the last Sunday of summer, I took my father's flag down at sunset and folded it tight. My sister brought the kids. We grilled and watched the light settle on the water. The marsh reflected a sky so clean you could forget storms exist. You don't. You keep your boots by the door. You honor the shape of the ground that holds you. You fix what you break. You tell the truth even when it costs you a quiet evening. Granddad would be proud, and he said, handing me the coarse cotton triangle. Maybe, I said, but I think he'd be gladder the marsh got its voice back. He sat while twilight closed. Somewhere a train called once and faded. Air smelled like cut grass and cool mud. In that hush, the lesson was simple as breath. Home isn't just a house. It's the ground that steadies you, the water that teaches patience. And the names you carry your fathers, your own spoken with care. I stood and hung the flag again, just to watch it lift. It waved above my porch like it never doubted we'd get here. Some fights look like fences and fees. The real ones are about respect for the land, for the names on the deed, and for neighbors who'll still be here when boards change. Ever stood up to an HOA that forgot what home means? Tell me below. I read every story. If you believe some fights are worth having, hit subscribe and join our porch stories.